The Council's Archaeology Service is based in the planning department, and part of our function is when developments are going to go ahead, we check to see whether there's likely to be any archaeology, and we put a planning condition on the application to say we require you to do archaeological work. So 5 years ago we had put a planning condition on our own council for the building of the new academy out at Lockerbie, because we were aware that a number of Bronze Age finds had been found, Bronze Age burials, on these little low hummocks that line the side of the river valley along the Annan over there. So we put on a watching brief condition and an evaluation to be done ahead of it in order to see whether there were Bronze Age burials. There were. What we were not expecting was a 30-metre long, 5,000-year-old Neolithic hall, one of only half a dozen ever excavated in Scotland. We did get our Bronze Age burials. This is a Bronze Age cremation urn, turned upside down and placed on a slab of rock. Extraordinarily difficult to try and excavate and lift out in a single piece, buried in a pit in the ground. There was a central Bronze Age burial on top of the mound that was an inhumation where the body had been put in, and then later cremations had been placed round it. And if Neolithic halls and Bronze Age burials weren't enough, we found 2 Anglo-Saxon halls. If you leave out Whitthorn, one of only 4 sites with identifiable Saxon halls in the country. We had 2 halls here. The first one, built of timber posts in lines going like this, later replaced by a big timber framed hall, which was set with horizontal timbers along the ground and then timber framing built up from there. And it just kept coming. They topped it all off with the best late medieval corn drying kiln I have ever seen in 30 years in the field. It was in stunning condition. Just in the very, very top corner, top there, you can see the edge of the mound, and the few little stones just on the very corner of the screen there are actually the start of the flue. The fire was set outside the mound and the hot air blew through a 5-metre long stone-lined flue, and they would have covered this area probably with a wattle hurdle and then put maybe cloth or something on top to hold the grains in, set the grain on top of it, and then the hot air is wafted through and dries the grains out. We would have loved to preserve this feature. We thought it would make a stunning feature, but apparently health and safety rules felt that children of secondary school age were likely to fall and or push each other into it, and therefore it had to be backfilled before the new academy was built. But that got 5 years off to a good start. We've had other work. This is Newbridge, heading on the A76, just outside of Dumfries, and here you can see the curving stones that are the setting for a prehistoric roundhouse. This is probably Bronze Age in date, and this was part of an application for a housing development on the site. Once we proved that the archaeology was there, the developers went away. They didn't get rid of the housing application, but the area of green space in the play area was moved so that it was over the top of the archaeology, and they could put their planning application in and know that they would be preserving the archaeology in the open ground. Sometimes you can't preserve and you have to excavate. This is a late Bronze Age, early Iron Age roundhouse, excavated over at Whitecrook near Glenluce, and this was ahead of sand and gravel quarrying for the extraction prior to the potential Dunragged bypass going in. So there were road development works on the A75, the farmer had lots of sand and gravel, but we were aware there were features in the area, and sure enough, when the archaeologists went in, a beautifully preserved roundhouse was revealed. Across the other side of the region, by the A74, just north of Lockerbie, we had another development site, and this unprepossessing little black stony patch in the middle is a Neolithic cremation burial, late Neolithic one. There are fragments of pottery and fragments of charred and burnt bone as well as charcoal. Heading to the far east of the region, up in Estelmuir, this is one I did personally. I was given a real time team opportunity. I was given one trowel, one JCB and 1,100 hectares of hillside. I put one 14-metre long trench in and went straight across the Roman road, first hit. Silty clay for the drainage gully there, and little grey layers, which are better shown in the section drawing. The silty layers are filling up the ditch, nice Roman road banked in the middle, and the little grey layers are the Romans fixing the potholes in their road. We've also asked the head of housing developments in the countryside out west for excavation to be done on more recent features. This is a post-medieval farmstead with a very distinctive red tile floor and a fireplace over there. So they did a careful excavation of the fireplace and the floor features, because actually we realised that we know very little about post-medieval farmsteads. Most of the buildings you see today are 18th and 19th century. We don't know about the small rural settlements, the individual houses that are in the countryside, of which we have several hundred ruins. And the archaeologists excavating that found this classic archive item, an example of a rural dwelling. A thatched roof, a loose dry stone wall, and a dry stone dyke round it, with a little pigsty built into one corner between that, with a little bit of roofing just between the outer wall and the house. And that is 1900. It's as recent as that. All buildings like that have either been lost or redeveloped into new houses. So when we get even relatively recent 200 or 300-year-old potential sites out there, we still think it's useful to get archaeological work done on them. Other examples of more recent things are industrial archaeology. This one wasn't actually commissioned by the Archaeology Department. This was done by the council's contaminated land people. And this, for those of you who are familiar with Dumfries, is Brooms Road car park. There is Brooms Road coming down there, and there's the access from Warburn Shopping Centre side. The round structures are the gas holders for the former gasworks of Dumfries. And we were seeing what remains survived, and this bit is actually part of an engine shed, and so is the surviving community centre there are parts of engine sheds, because originally, when Dumfries railway station was a lot bigger, the trains actually ran down Brooms Road and pulled in to supply fuel and so on for the gasworks. And out at Annan, there's a new company founded looking to reconstitute the Annandale distillery. And although parts of the old distillery, like the chimney and the bonded warehouses and so on, are still standing, they got Glasgow University to come and excavate ahead of their development and revealed the most fantastic set of bases of the stills. They've still got the pipes and the heating units running through. Other sections still have the furnaces, and there is a small coal cellar off on one side, right side of the steps. This was only founded in 1830, but it went through at least 5 changes before it went out of use in the early 20th century. And the new developers of the site are hoping to actually be able, once they finally go ahead with making their new distillery, to actually incorporate this, possibly to even cover it with a glass floor so that it can be seen by visitors coming to it. So we cover all periods with the planning ahead of development, right up to this. This is, I can never remember its number, Unit 210 at Heathhall Aerodrome. This is an NCO's headquarters, NCO's billets from the World War II aerodrome. You can spot it for the NCOs because it has a boiler for heating. Squaddies don't get heating in their huts. But this one has a boiler on one side, and we had an application in to develop, well, not even develop the site, demolish the whole building and simply put containers there for storage purposes. So one of the things that we required was that a full photographic and drawn record be made of the building, because these World War II structures were only temporary. We lose them all the time, and if we don't get a record made, there won't be any of them left, especially since Seathorne is now a recognised industrial estate. And sometimes in development, the unexpected crops up. This is an 18th century sandstone lined well that turned up during a development down on Friars Vennel, where there were no archaeological conditions, but they were putting the modern drainage in a redevelopment, and part of cutting the drainage trench suddenly revealed this 18th century sandstone well. There's a spring line that runs along Irish Street. The reason you have Brewery Street down there is that the brewery was actually built along a line of natural springs so that it had its own water supply. And some gravestones. These turned up as part of a council project in Annan, where they were actually relaying the pavement, and they lifted the pavement and they found bits of grave slabs and bones. And I got a very rapid emergency call out. It turned out in the end that the bones were actually animal bones. They were from somebody's lunch. And the gravestones are broken ones that it would appear that the kirk at Annan had had its broken and leaning gravestones cleared out by the minister at the late end of the 19th, at the start of the 20th century, and rather than have bits of broken gravestones, including named individuals and so on it, the minister got the council to bury them under the pavement.